At Christmas dinner, my family called me a disgraceful single mum. My dad shouted, "Get out!" and kicked me out of the house. I just said, "All right," and walked away quietly. They had no idea the whole family was living off my $68 million tech company. The next day, I moved to my Malibu mansion and froze all their allowance accounts, sending them into panic. The snow was falling the way it does in movies. Soft, white, relentless. Each flake a tiny betrayal, accumulating into something you can't ignore. I watched them through the frost-trimmed window of my father's house. The house I grew up in. The house where every Christmas for 32 years had been catalogued in my memory, like evidence in a case I didn't know I was building. My daughter, Emma, was 7. She sat beside me on the worn leather couch in the living room, her small fingers tracing patterns on the condensation, drawing hearts and stars, while the adults prepared dinner in the kitchen. I could hear them, the clatter of dishes, my mother's nervous laugh, my sister Victoria's sharp tone cutting through the warmth like a knife through butter. "She's late again," Victoria said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Classic Sarah. Can't even show up on time to Christmas dinner." I checked my watch. We were 4 minutes late. 4 minutes after driving 3 hours through a snowstorm with a 7-year-old who needed 2 bathroom breaks and wanted to stop at every gas station to look at the holiday displays. Emma looked up at me, her dark eyes, so much like mine, searching my face for a reaction. I smiled. I'd learned to smile through a lot of things. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "Let's go say hello." The kitchen was exactly as I remembered it. Copper pots hanging from the ceiling rack, the old wooden table scarred with decades of family meals. The smell of my mother's roast turkey mixing with cinnamon and pine. My father stood at the head of the table, carving knife in hand, looking every bit the patriarch he'd always imagined himself to be. Tall, broad-shouldered, even at 68, with silver hair he was vain about, and a voice that could fill a room or crush a spirit, depending on his mood. My mother, small and bird-like, fluttered around the kitchen in her Christmas sweater, reindeer with actual jingle bells sewn onto them. She'd been fluttering for 40 years, I realized. Always moving, always accommodating, always making herself smaller so everyone else could be bigger. Victoria leaned against the counter, wine glass in hand, wearing what I recognized as a Valentino dress. I'd seen it in her Instagram stories last week, tagged with #treatyourself and 3 champagne emojis. The dress cost $8,000. I knew because I'd approved the payment from her account. My brother Marcus sat at the table already, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging our entrance. His watch caught the light, a Patek Philippe I'd seen him unbox on his YouTube channel. $62,000. I'd approved that payment too. "There she is," my father announced, not looking up from the turkey. "The prodigal daughter graces us with her presence." "Hi, Dad. Merry Christmas." My voice was steady. I'd had practice. Emma pressed closer to my side, and I felt her small hand slip into mine. She'd learned early to read rooms, to feel the temperature of adult moods. No 7-year-old should have that skill. But here we were. "Merry Christmas, Grandpa," she said softly. He glanced at her, his expression softening fractionally. "Hello, Emma. You've gotten taller, didn't?" "I'm 7 now," she said proudly. "I had a birthday." "Did you?" It wasn't a question. He'd missed it. They all had. I'd sent invitations to her party, a small affair at a park with 10 of her school friends. I'd made the cake myself, chocolate with buttercream frosting, decorated with edible flowers, because Emma loved gardens. None of them had come. Victoria had texted. "Can't make it, spa weekend in Napa. You understand?" I'd understood. "Dinner's ready," my mother announced with forced cheer. "Everyone sit down. Sarah, you and Emma can sit there." She gestured to the far end of the table, the spots farthest from my father, as if proximity might cause combustion. We sat. Emma's legs dangled from the chair, not quite reaching the floor. I adjusted her napkin, poured her water, and tried to remember when I'd stopped feeling like I belonged in this room. The answer came easily. I'd never belonged here. Not really. I'd just spent 32 years pretending otherwise. Dinner began with the usual choreography. Food was passed, plates were filled, wine was poured, though notably, my glass remained empty until I poured it myself. Conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Victoria's new apartment in the city, Marcus's latest business venture, his 5th in 3 years, each one failing more spectacularly than the last. My father's golf tournament, my mother's book club. No one asked about me. No one asked about Emma. We were there physically present, eating the same food and breathing the same air, but we existed in a separate dimension, visible but not quite real. I'd learned not to mind. Or rather, I'd learned to act like I didn't mind, which wasn't the same thing but was close enough to get through dinners like this. "So, Sarah," my father said finally, 20 minutes into the meal. His tone carried that particular edge I recognized from childhood, the one that preceded lectures about responsibility, disappointment, wasted potential. "Still working at that computer thing?" Computer thing. My company, Lumina Tech, had just been valued at $68 million. We developed an AI-powered platform that revolutionized data security for healthcare providers. We had contracts with 17 major hospital systems across the country. Forbes had featured me in their 30 Under 30 issue when I was 28, and again in their Self-Made Women feature last year. We employed 43 people, all of whom received full benefits, competitive salaries, and equity stakes. Computer thing. "Yes," I said simply. "Still doing that." "Must be nice to play around with computers all day." Victoria chimed in, refilling her wine glass. "I mean, it's not a real career, but at least it keeps you busy." Emma's hand found mine under the table again. She squeezed 3 times. Our secret code. "I love you." I squeezed back 4 times. "I love you more." "Sarah doesn't have a real job," Marcus added, not looking up from his phone. "She just messes around with code or whatever. It's basically a hobby." A hobby. I'd worked 90-hour weeks for 5 years to build Lumina from nothing. I'd taught myself to code at night after Emma went to sleep. Hunched over a second-hand laptop at our kitchen table in the tiny apartment we'd lived in after her father left. I'd pitched to 73 investors before one finally said yes. I'd survived on ramen and coffee and pure determination, believing that if I could just build something good enough, something valuable enough, I could give Emma the life she deserved. And I had. Emma went to the best private school in the state. She had a trust fund that would pay for any college she chose and set her up for life afterward. We lived in a house with an ocean view, where she had her own art studio and a library filled with every book she'd ever wanted. She took piano lessons, art classes, swimming lessons. She was happy, safe, loved, but sure. It was a hobby. At least she's doing something, my mother ventured timidly. It's good to stay busy, especially as a single mother. It must be so hard raising Emma alone. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Hard, difficult, unfortunate. As if being a single mother was a personal failure rather than a circumstance of life. As if Emma was a burden rather than the best thing that had ever happened to me. Emma's father sends child support, at least? Victoria asked, her tone dripping with false concern. I mean, you must need all the help you can get. No, I said, cutting a piece of turkey with deliberate precision. He doesn't. Typical, my father muttered. You always did have terrible taste in men, Sarah. That boy was never going to amount to anything. I told you that. You did, I thought. You told me that when I was 22 and pregnant and terrified, when I came to you for help, and you said I'd made my bed, and now I had to lie in it. You told me that when I was 23 and alone, when Emma was 6 months old, and I was so exhausted, I could barely remember my own name. When I called to ask if I could come home for just a few weeks to catch my breath, and you said no because I needed to learn responsibility. You told me that every chance you got, as if I could somehow forget. Well, Victoria said, leaning back in her chair with the satisfaction of someone delivering a verdict. At least you're managing. I mean, you're not exactly thriving, but you're surviving. That's something, surviving. I almost laughed. I wanted to laugh. The absurdity of it all was like a pressure building in my chest, demanding release. I didn't laugh. I never laughed. Not here. Not with them. Instead, I smiled that smile I'd perfected. Pleasant, mild, accommodating, and took a sip of wine. Emma, bless her, had been silent through all of this, eating her dinner with the careful manners I'd taught her. She was good at being invisible when she needed to be, at making herself small, another skill no 7-year-old should possess. Emma, my mother said suddenly, as if just remembering she was there, did Santa bring you nice presents this year? Emma looked at me, uncertain. We'd celebrated Christmas 2 days ago, just the two of us. I'd gotten her an easel and a complete set of professional-grade art supplies because she'd shown interest in painting. We'd spent the morning making pancakes in shapes, stars and hearts, and one ambitious attempt at a unicorn. And the afternoon watching movies on the couch, wrapped in blankets. Perfectly content. Yes, Emma said politely. Mama got me painting things. Painting things, my father repeated. Well, that's creative. The way he said creative made it sound like a criticism. In his world, creativity was frivolous, impractical, a luxury for people who didn't have to worry about real life. Never mind that creativity had built my company, had built our life, had built everything I'd achieved. She's very talented, I said. And my voice carried an edge I hadn't intended. Emma was talented. Her teacher had called her remarkably gifted and suggested advanced art programs. She saw the world in colors and shapes and possibilities, and I would support that for as long as she wanted to pursue it. Art, Victoria scoffed. That's a great career path. What's she going to do? paint portraits at the mall. She's 7, I said quietly. She can be anything she wants. With your example, my father said, and there it was, the edge in his voice sharpening into something cruel. Come on, Sarah. Let's be realistic. You're 32 years old, single, living in who knows what kind of situation, working some made-up computer job. What kind of example is that for a child? The room went quiet. Even Marcus looked up from his phone. I felt Emma's hand tighten around mine under the table. 3 squeezes. I love you. I squeezed back. 4 times. I love you more. My situation, I said carefully, each word measured, is fine. Fine, my father repeated. You call this fine? Look at you, look at your life. You had so much potential, Sarah. You could have been something. You could have married well, settled down, had a real family. Instead, you threw it all away on some fantasy. And now you're struggling to raise a child alone, playing around with computers, pretending you have a career. It's disgraceful. Disgraceful. The word landed like a slap. I felt it physically, the way you feel the first drops of rain before a storm, the way you feel the shift in air pressure before lightning strikes. Emma's hand was shaking in mine now. She was 7 years old, sitting at her grandfather's table on Christmas, listening to him call her mother disgraceful. I think we should go, I said, my voice still calm, still controlled. I started to stand. Sit down, my father commanded. We're not done here. I think we are. I said sit down. His palm hit the table, rattling dishes. My mother flinched. Victoria's eyes went wide with something that looked like excitement, as if she'd been waiting for this drama. Marcus held up his phone slightly, and I realized with a sick jolt that he might be recording this. I sat. Not because he'd told me to, but because I needed a moment to think, to breathe, to decide how to handle this without traumatizing my daughter further. You want to know what I think? My father continued, his voice rising. I think you're a disgrace to this family. I think you've been a disappointment since the day you got pregnant out of wedlock. I think you've wasted every opportunity we ever gave you. And now you're wasting your daughter's future too. You're selfish, irresponsible. And frankly, I'm embarrassed to call you my daughter. The snow continued to fall outside, soft and white and relentless. That's enough, I said quietly. It's not enough. It's the truth. You needed to hear this. Someone needed to tell you. You're a single mother with a made-up job, living God knows where, barely scraping by, and you have the audacity to show up here, late, acting like everything's fine. It's pathetic. Stop, I said, louder now. I won't stop. This is my house, and I'll speak my mind. You know what your problem is? You never learnt responsibility. You never learnt sacrifice. You just do whatever you want. Consequences be damned. And then you expect everyone else to pick up the pieces. I felt something shift inside me then. Not a snap exactly. More like a settling, like tectonic plates sliding into a new configuration. There was no anger, no hurt. Just a crystalline clarity, cold and sharp and absolute. I'd spent 32 years in Madis trying to earn their approval. 32 years trying to prove I was worthy. Trying to be good enough, smart enough, successful enough. 32 years carrying their disappointment like a weight on my shoulders, internalizing their criticism, believing on some deep level that maybe they were right. Maybe I was a disappointment. Maybe I had wasted my potential. And in that moment, sitting at that table with my daughter's trembling hand in mine, I realized something profound. I didn't need to prove anything to them. I never had. "You're right," I said, and my voice was steady, calm, almost pleasant. "This is your house." My father blinked, surprised by my agreement. "And you're right that I should leave," I continued. "Emma, baby, get your coat." She slid off her chair immediately, grateful for permission to escape. "Now, wait just a minute." My mother started. "No," I said gently. "It's okay. We're going." "Sarah, don't be dramatic," Victoria said. "Dad's just trying to help you see reality." "I see reality perfectly clearly," I said. I helped Emma into her coat, zipped it carefully, pulled her hood up over her dark hair. "Thank you for dinner." "You're just going to leave?" my father demanded. "Run away like you always do when you hear something you don't like?" "I'm not running," I said. "I'm choosing." "Choosing what?" "Peace." I picked up our bags. Emma held my hand. We walked toward the front door, while 3 pairs of eyes watched us, confused by my lack of reaction, my absence of tears, my refusal to engage in the fight they'd been spoiling for. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," my father called after us. "This is exactly why you're a disgrace. You can't face the truth. You can't handle criticism. You're weak, Sarah. You always have been." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. I turned back to look at them one last time. My father red-faced and righteous. My mother wringing her hands. Victoria with her wine glass and her designer dress, Marcus still half-focused on his phone. "You wanted me to face the truth," I said quietly. "Okay, here's the truth." They waited, expecting a vindication, expecting me to finally admit they were right, expecting capitulation or tears or some dramatic confession. I smiled instead. A real smile this time. Not the plastic one I'd been wearing all evening. A smile that held knowledge they didn't have. Power they couldn't imagine. "Merry Christmas," I said. "And then, enjoy the rest of your evening." We stepped out into the snow. "Get out!" my father shouted behind us, as if it was his idea, as if he was kicking me out rather than me choosing to leave. "Get out of my house!" "All right," I said to the snowfall, to the dark, to myself. Emma and I walked to the car. I buckled her in, kissed her forehead, whispered that everything was okay, that we were okay, that we were better than okay. As I started the engine, I saw my mother at the window, her small face pressed against the glass. She wasn't following us out. She wasn't choosing us. She was just watching, the way she'd always watched, the way she'd watched my whole life, while staying safely on the sidelines. I pulled out of the driveway. The snow was getting heavier now, coating the windshield, muffling the world. Emma was quiet in the back seat, and I knew she was processing, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to figure out if it was somehow her fault. "Emma," I said, catching her eyes in the rearview mirror. "None of that was about you. You know that, right?" She nodded, but her eyes were uncertain. Your grandfather is wrong, I continued. About me, about us, about everything. You are not a mistake. I am not a disgrace. We are not struggling. We are not barely surviving. We are thriving, baby. We are thriving in ways they can't even imagine. Why don't they like us? She asked. And the question broke my heart because I'd been asking myself the same thing for 32 years. I don't know, I admitted. I think maybe they don't like themselves very much, and it's easier to be mean to other people than to look at that. But it doesn't matter because we like us, right? Right, she said, and I heard the smile in her voice. Right, I echoed. We drove through the snow, heading south, heading home, heading toward a future they couldn't comprehend. I didn't know it yet, but they had 12 hours of peace left. 12 hours before the truth would start to unfold. 12 hours before the scaffolding that held up their entire world would begin to dismantle itself, piece by piece, revelation by revelation. 12 hours before they realized exactly what they'd just done. The drive home took 4 hours instead of 3. The snow was relentless, turning the highway into a white void where distance and time seemed to lose meaning. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, her small chest rising and falling with the easy rhythm of childhood, unburdened for now by what she'd witnessed. I drove in silence, my mind sharp and clear in a way it hadn't been in years. Every mile marker was a meditation. Every turn of the wheel was a decision. By the time we crossed into Malibu, the snow had given way to rain. Cold, cleansing Pacific rain that washed the windshield in sheets. The house was dark when we arrived. A sprawling modern structure of glass and steel and wood perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. I'd bought it 2 years ago, after Lumina's Series B funding round. The real estate agent had called it a statement property. I'd called it home. I carried Emma inside, still sleeping, and tucked her into bed without waking her. Her room was exactly as she'd left it. Art supplies scattered across her desk, a half-finished painting of a sunset on her easel, books stacked beside her bed in precarious towers. She collected stories the way some people collect coins, treasuring each one, rereading her favorites until the pages wore soft. I stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep. She looked so much like I had at that age. Same dark hair, same serious expression even in sleep, same small hands that somehow held such big dreams. I'd been 7 once too. I remembered what it felt like to be small in a world that seemed determined to remind you of your smallness. Not her, I'd promised myself when she was born. She would never feel that way. I would make sure of it. I'd kept that promise. I'd kept all my promises to her, though. The question now was, what promises did I owe to myself? I walked through the house, turning on lights, trailing my fingers along surfaces I'd chosen with care. The reclaimed wood dining table, the leather couch facing the ocean, the custom bookshelves that lined one entire wall. Every object in this house represented a choice, a value, a version of the life I'd built. In my office, a glass-walled room with a view of the Pacific, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the darkness, casting blue light across my face. I had work to do. The thing about being the CEO and founder of a tech company is that you understand systems. You understand architecture, not just of code, but of life, gunny, of power. You understand how things connect, how they depend on each other, how one small change can cascade through an entire structure. I understood the architecture of my family's life very well. I'd built most of it. After all, it had started small 5 years ago. Victoria had called, frantic. Something about her credit cards being maxed out and her landlord threatening eviction. Could I loan her a little money? Just until she got back on her feet. I'd sent her $5,000. She'd never paid it back. But she'd called again 3 months later with another emergency. And then another. Eventually, loans became allowances. And allowances became accounts that I funded monthly. Marcus's business ventures were expensive. Each one required capital for equipment, for marketing, for staff he'd hire, and then have to let go when the venture inevitably folded. Could I invest? It would be mutually beneficial, he'd assured me. I'd get equity in his companies. I'd invested. The equity was worthless, but the requests kept coming. My parents were on a fixed income, they'd explained. My father's pension didn't stretch as far as it used to. The house needed repairs. A new roof, new pipes, that sort of thing. Could I help out just this once? I'd helped. And then I'd helped again and again. Somewhere along the way, without any explicit discussion or acknowledgement, I'd become the financial foundation of the entire family. Victoria's apartment in the city, I paid the rent. Marcus's car, his watch, his lifestyle, I funded it. My parents' house, their property taxes, their country club membership, all of it came from accounts I'd set up. Automatic transfers that happened the first of every month. Invisible as oxygen. They didn't know. Or rather, they knew on some level but chose not to examine it too closely, the way you might choose not to examine where your electricity comes from or how water reaches your tap. It just appeared, reliably, month after month, enabling their lives, holding up their world. I'd never told them about Lumina. Not really. They knew I did something with computers, but I'd never corrected their dismissive assessment. I'd never shown them articles about the company, never mentioned valuations or funding rounds or contracts. I'd learned early that success invited two things from them: dismissal or resentment, sometimes both simultaneously. So I'd stayed quiet. I'd let them think I was barely scraping by, let them pity me, let them criticize my choices, all while I quietly paid for their lives. Why? That was the question I'd been avoiding for 5 years. The answer was complicated, woven from threads of obligation and hope, and a desperate, childish belief that if I could just be good enough, generous enough, successful enough, if I could just prove my worth in some undeniable way, they would finally see me, really see me. And maybe, finally, love me the way I'd always needed to be loved. But they couldn't see me. They refused to. I'd been invisible to them my entire life. And money had only made me more invisible, more useful, but less seen. A resource rather than a person. Tonight had clarified that with perfect precision. I opened my financial management software and looked at the accounts I'd been maintaining for my family. The numbers glowed on the screen, stark and undeniable. Victoria told, $4,200 monthly allowance, plus a supplemental account with $8,000 for emergencies. Marcus $3,800 monthly allowance, plus active investment accounts totaling $127,000. My parents, $6,500 monthly for household expenses, plus separate accounts for property taxes, $14,000 annually, and country club dues, $22,000 annually. Over 5 years, I'd transferred $1.4 million to my family. $1.4 million. I sat back in my chair, staring at the numbers. They'd called me a disgrace while living off my success. They'd called me a failure while I funded their lives. They'd called me selfish while I'd been keeping them afloat. The irony was so sharp it was almost funny. Almost. I thought about Emma, asleep in her room. I thought about the way she'd held my hand at dinner. The way she'd squeezed 3 times. The way she'd tried to make herself small enough to avoid their notice. I thought about how she'd asked why they didn't like us, how I hadn't had a good answer. I thought about the kind of person I wanted her to become, the values I wanted to teach her. Kindness, yes. Generosity, absolutely. But also boundaries, self-respect. The understanding that love isn't something you have to earn through service. That family isn't an obligation to people who hurt you. That blood relation doesn't entitle anyone to your peace. What example was I setting by allowing this to continue? The answer was clear. I pulled up the account management interface and began typing. My fingers moved with certainty, executing commands I'd been mentally rehearsing for 5 years without admitting it to myself. Account freeze. Victoria. Effective immediately, account freeze. Marcus. Effective immediately, account freeze. Parents' household. Effective immediately, account freeze. Parents' property tax. Effective immediately, account freeze. Parents' country club. Effective immediately, 5 clicks. 5 seconds. 5 years of invisible support gone. I didn't delete the accounts. I wasn't cruel. But I suspended all automatic transfers, locked access, and set up notifications that would alert them, and only them, to the change in status. They'd see it when they woke up, when they checked their accounts over morning coffee, when they tried to use cards that would now be declined. Then I opened my email and began to write. The thing about being good with systems is that you keep records, documentation, evidence. Not because you're planning for war, but because clarity matters, because truth matters, because sometimes the only way to make people understand reality is to show it to them in terms they can't dismiss. I'd kept records of everything. Every transfer, every loan, every investment, every payment. I had spreadsheets showing 5 years of financial support. I had text messages and emails with their requests. I had investment documents for Marcus's failed ventures, lease agreements for Victoria's apartment with my name as guarantor, statements for every bill I'd paid on their behalf. I compiled it all into a single document, a comprehensive financial history of our relationship, laid out in tables and graphs and bullet points. It was detailed, factual, and utterly damning in its clarity. The email itself was simple. Subject: Financial matters, important. Dear family, effective immediately, I'm discontinuing all financial support to each of you. All automatic transfers have been suspended, and all supplemental accounts have been frozen. Attached: You'll find a complete record of financial transfers over the past 5 years. I think you'll find it illuminating. I want to be clear. This isn't punishment. This is simply me establishing boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. You are all adults, fully capable of supporting yourselves. It's time we all acted like it. For context, since you seemed confused at dinner, I am the CEO and founder of Lumina Tech, a healthcare data security company currently valued at $68 million. We have 43 employees, contracts with 17 major hospital systems, and we're projecting 31 million in revenue this year. I've been running this company for 5 years while you believed I was playing with computers. Emma and I live in a 6-bedroom house in Malibu. We are not struggling. We are not barely surviving. We are thriving. I will not be attending future family gatherings. I will not be available for emergencies, financial or otherwise. I'm choosing peace, which means choosing distance from people who see me as a disgrace while living off my success. I wish you all well. Sarah. My finger hovered over the send button for exactly 3 seconds. Then I clicked it. The email disappeared into the ether, winging its way through fiber optic cables and satellites, carrying truth like a payload into the heart of their Christmas morning. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The ocean was dark and vast, illuminated only by moonlight breaking through clouds. I could hear the waves, that eternal rhythm of advance and retreat, the sound that had become the soundtrack of our life here. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Free. The weight I'd been carrying, the hope that they'd change, the belief that I could somehow earn their love, the desperate need to prove my worth, all of it lifted, dissipating into the night like mist. I'd spent 32 years trying to be enough for them. It had never worked because it was never about me. Their inability to see me, to value me, to love me, that was their failure, not mine. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need them at all. The realization should have been devastating. Instead, it was liberating. I thought about what the morning would bring. They'd wake up on Christmas Day, smug and satisfied after last night's confrontation, believing they'd put me in my place. My father would make coffee. My mother would start preparing breakfast. Victoria would check her phone, probably to post something about family and holidays and gratitude. And then they'd see it. The email, the frozen accounts, the truth laid out in undeniable numbers. I wondered who would call first. My money was on Victoria. She had rent due next week, and her account would be empty. Or maybe Marcus, who had some expensive dinner planned with friends and would discover his credit cards weren't working. Or maybe, and this possibility made me smile, maybe none of them would call. Maybe they'd be too shocked, too embarrassed, too proud to admit they needed to reach out, that they'd been dependent on someone they'd called a disgrace. It didn't matter. Either way, the silence would speak volumes. I checked the time. 2:47 a.m. In a few hours, Emma would wake up. We'd make breakfast together, maybe pancakes again. She'd liked those. We'd spend the day doing whatever she wanted. Maybe painting, maybe watching movies, maybe just being together in the quiet house by the ocean. And we'd be okay. Better than okay. We'd be free. The call started at 9:23 a.m. I know the exact time because I was watching. Emma and I were in the kitchen making those pancakes, her standing on a step stool beside me, carefully pouring batter onto the griddle in shapes that approximated stars. When my phone lit up with my father's name, I let it ring. Aren't you going to answer? Emma asked, watching the phone vibrate across the counter. Nope, I said, flipping a pancake. We're busy. She smiled at that, understanding in the way children understand when adults break their own rules, sensing that something significant was happening even if she couldn't name it. The phone stopped ringing. 3 seconds later, it started again. My mother this time. Still busy, I told Emma, and she giggled. By the time we sat down to eat, I'd received 17 calls. 4 from my father, 5 from my mother, 6 from Victoria, and 2 from Marcus. They'd also discovered group texts, apparently, because my phone was flooded with messages. Dad, call me immediately. Dad, Sarah. Dad, this is not a joke. Call me now. Mum. Honey, please pick up. Mum. We need to talk about this, Mum. I don't understand what's happening. Victoria. Are you fucking kidding me right now? Victoria. My rent is due Monday. Victoria. You can't just do this, Victoria. This is insane. Victoria. Call me back now. Marcus. Yo, this is messed up. Marcus, I have bills, Marcus. WTF, Sarah. I turned my phone face down on the table and focused on Emma, who was drowning her star-shaped pancakes in syrup with intense concentration. These are the best pancakes, she announced. The best? I asked. Better than last time? Way better, because we're not sad. The observation landed with unexpected weight. She was right. Last time, 2 days ago, on actual Christmas, we'd been happy, certainly, but there had been an undercurrent of melancholy that I'd tried to hide too. The knowledge that we'd be seeing my family soon, that we'd have to endure their dismissal, their criticism, their carefully calibrated disappointment. Now that weight was gone. We were lighter. We were free. You're right, I said. We're not sad at all. My phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Emma looked at it, then at me. They're mad? Probably, I admitted. They're learning some things they didn't know before. And people don't always like learning new things, especially when those things change how they see themselves. She thought about this, chewing pancake. What things? How do you explain this to a 7-year-old? How do you say they thought I was a failure, but I was actually keeping them afloat, and now they're discovering what life looks like without me, and they're panicking because they've built their entire existence on a foundation they didn't even know was there? Grown-up things, I said, which was a cop-out, but also true. Don't worry about it, today is about us. What do you want to do? Beach, she suggested hopefully. Beach, I agreed. We spent the morning at the water's edge. The storm had passed, leaving the sky scrubbed clean and impossibly blue. Emma collected shells and built sandcastles while I sat on a blanket, letting the sun warm my face. My phone continued its frantic buzzing in my bag, a muffled percussion of panic that I ignored with increasing ease. By afternoon, the messages had evolved from demanding to desperate. Mum, please Sarah, we need to talk, Mum. Your father is very upset, Mum. Can we meet somewhere? Mum. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. Victoria, my landlord is calling Victoria. I'm serious. I need that money. Victoria, you're going to ruin my credit. Victoria, how can you do this to me? Marcus, dude, this isn't cool. Marcus, I'm telling you, I have actual bills. Marcus, at least send something for now. Marcus, we can talk later, but I need money now. And finally, from my father, Dad. You've made your point. Now fix this. That one made me laugh out loud. Emma looked up from her sandcastle. Curious. Private joke, I told her. Made my point. As if this was a negotiation. As if I was making a dramatic gesture that would eventually be resolved. As if this was a tantrum rather than a decision. As if I would eventually come around and everything would go back to normal. They still didn't understand. They thought this was about last night, about the dinner, about the specific things that were said. They thought if they apologized, or more likely, if they waited long enough for my anger to pass, everything would reset to the previous status quo. They didn't realize the previous status quo was gone, demolished, irretrievable. I wasn't angry. I was done. There's a difference. We stayed at the beach until sunset, until Emma's sandcastle was complete. An elaborate structure with towers and walls, and a moat she'd carefully engineered. We took photos of it, documenting her creation before the tide would inevitably claim it. She was okay with that, the impermanence. She understood that some things were beautiful precisely because they didn't last. Can we get dinner somewhere nice? She asked as we packed up our things. The nicest, I promised. We went to a little Italian place we loved. A family-owned restaurant where the owner's grandmother still made pasta by hand in the back. Emma ordered fettuccine Alfredo and talked about her sandcastle, about school starting again next week, about a book she was reading about a girl who discovered she could talk to animals. She didn't mention my family. She didn't ask about the phone that kept buzzing. She just ate her pasta and chatted happily, secure in the knowledge that we were okay, that we had each other, that this, right here, right now, was enough. When we got home, Emma went straight to her room to work on her painting, while I finally, reluctantly, checked my phone. 63 missed calls, 147 text messages, 12 voicemails. I sat on the couch overlooking the ocean and began to listen to the voicemails. Each one a small window into their unraveling. Sarah, this isn't funny. Whatever point you think you're making, you've made it. Now call me back so we can sort this out like adults. His tone was irritated but controlled, still confident, still certain this was fixable. Okay, seriously, what the hell? You can't just cut people off like this. This is psychotic. Call me back right now. Psychotic. Interesting choice of words. Honey, please. Your father is very upset and I don't understand what's happening. We should talk about this. Family doesn't do this to each other. Please call me. Family doesn't do this to each other. I almost laughed. What had they been doing to me for 32 years? Yo, Sarah. Look, I'm sorry if we were harsh last night, okay? Sometimes Dad goes too far. You know how he is. But you can't just, destroy everyone's life over dinner conversation. That's extreme. Just call me back. We can figure this out. An apology. Of sorts. The first one I'd received. My landlord just called. He says if I don't have rent by Monday, I'm getting evicted. Evicted, Sarah. Is that what you want? You want me to be homeless? Because that's what's going to happen. This is so fucked up. You have no right to do this to me. No right. Her voice was shaking. Real panic now. Not just irritation. All right. I've reviewed the document you sent. I'll admit I was unaware of the extent of your financial contributions, but that doesn't excuse this behavior. If you had concerns about money, you should have discussed them with us directly instead of pulling this stunt. You're behaving like a child, Sarah. Call me so we can resolve this maturely. Still no real apology. Still positioning himself as the reasonable one. Still finding a way to make this my fault. Sarah, please. I'm begging you. Your father won't admit it, but we can't afford the house without your help. The property taxes are due next month and we don't have the money. I don't know what we'll do. Please, sweetheart, please call me back. We can talk about this. We can fix this. Just please, please call. Her voice broke on the last word. This one hit differently than the others. My mother, finally admitting the truth. Finally acknowledging the structure that had been holding them up. Too late, I thought. Years too late. I deleted the voicemails without responding to any of them and turned my attention to the text messages. Most were variations on the same themes: demands, accusations, desperate pleas. But a few stood out. Victoria, 3:23 p.m. I just looked you up. Lumina Tech, $68 million valuation. This whole time you've been rich and letting us think you were struggling? What kind of person does that? Marcus, 4:44 p.m. So you've been secretly loaded and just watching us? That's fucked up, Sarah. That's really fucked up. The cognitive dissonance was breathtaking. They'd spent years dismissing my work, calling it a hobby, a computer thing, not a real job. They'd spent last night calling me a disgrace, a failure, barely surviving. And now, confronted with evidence of my success, they were angry that I hadn't told them. They couldn't have it both ways. They couldn't dismiss me and then be mad I didn't share. But they were trying anyway, performing impressive mental gymnastics to maintain their position as victims in a story where they were very clearly not. There was one more text, though, that caught my attention. From Victoria, sent at 6:37 p.m. I called Aunt Linda, she's going to call you. She says you need to make this right. Aunt Linda, my father's sister. A woman I'd seen maybe 3 times in the last decade, who'd never called to check on me, who'd never met Emma, who'd shown no interest in my life until apparently now, when her brother needed reinforcement. Right on cue, my phone rang. Aunt Linda's name appeared on the screen. I answered, curious despite myself. Sarah. Her voice was warm, familiar in that way distant relatives' voices are. Recognizable, but not intimate. It's so good to hear from you. Well, not hear from you exactly, but you know what I mean. How are you, dear? I'm fine, Aunt Linda. How are you? Oh, can't complain. Listen, honey, I heard there was some trouble at Christmas dinner, and I wanted to reach out. Family is so important, and sometimes we say things we don't mean when emotions run high. Here it came. The mediation attempt, the pressure to reconcile. Aunt Linda, I interrupted gently, did my father ask you to call me? A pause. Well, yes, he mentioned that you two had a disagreement, and I thought maybe I could help. I appreciate the thought, I said, but this isn't a disagreement. This is a boundary. I'm not going to discuss it or negotiate it. I hope you understand. But Sarah, they're your family. You can't just cut them off over one bad dinner. It wasn't one bad dinner, I said quietly. It was 32 years of bad dinners, so this was just the last one. Another pause. Longer this time. I didn't realize things were that bad. How would you? We haven't spoken in 3 years. That's not fair. It's perfectly fair. You didn't care about my life when you thought I was struggling. You don't get to care about it now just because my father asked you to intervene. I'm not being cruel, Aunt Linda. I'm being clear. I wish you well, but I'm not going to continue this conversation. Sarah, goodbye, Aunt Linda. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from adrenaline, from the strangeness of speaking truth so plainly, from the surreal experience of enforcing boundaries with people who'd never believed I would. Emma appeared in the doorway, her painting smock splattered with colors. I finished my sunset, she announced. Want to see? Absolutely, I said, putting the phone down and following her to her room. The painting was beautiful. Swirls of orange and pink and purple bleeding into each other. The sun a golden orb sinking into waves rendered in shades of blue and green. She'd captured movement, emotion, something essential about the way light transforms water. Emma, this is incredible, I said. And I meant it. You have real talent, baby. She beamed, and in that moment, I was reminded why all of this mattered. Why boundaries mattered. Why choosing peace mattered. Why walking away from people who diminished us mattered. Because this, my daughter, her art, her joy, our quiet life, this was what I was protecting. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I opened my laptop and searched for my family's social media accounts. Victoria had posted at 8:47 p.m. Sometimes the people you trust most turn out to be strangers. Processing a lot tonight. Family is complicated. Shared real talk, boundaries matter. The irony of her using boundaries matter was almost too perfect. The comments were sympathetic. Friends offering support, asking if she was okay, telling her she deserved better. She was accepting their sympathy, their validation, their reinforcement of a narrative where she was the victim. She'd made her account public, probably hoping I'd see it, hoping I'd feel guilty or pressured to respond. I didn't feel guilty. Marcus had posted a vague story, a photo of his expensive watch with the caption, "Value isn't always where you think it is." I couldn't tell if he was being philosophical or just obtuse. Probably both. My parents weren't on social media, which was probably for the best. I imagined them sitting in their house, my father pacing, my mother worrying, both of them trying to understand how the floor had suddenly disappeared beneath their feet. Part of me felt bad for them. A small part, the part that still remembered being young and believing that parents were infallible, that family was sacred, that blood created unbreakable bonds. But mostly I felt relieved, light, free. I closed the laptop and walked out onto the deck. The ocean was dark and infinite, the sound of waves constant and soothing. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of light, the world continued. Billions of people living their lives, making their choices, building and destroying and rebuilding. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. "This is Robert Chen, your father's attorney. I've been retained to discuss the matter of financial support for your parents. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to arrange a meeting." A lawyer. They'd hired a lawyer. I read the message 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion. Surprise, then disbelief, then something that might have been admiration for the sheer audacity of it. They were going to try to legally compel me to continue supporting them. That's what this was. They were going to argue. What? Some kind of implied contract. A moral obligation backed by legal precedent. It wouldn't work. I knew enough about law to know that adult children have no legal obligation to support their parents, especially when that support had been voluntary and can be withdrawn at any time. But the fact that they'd tried, that they'd hired an attorney rather than just apologizing, rather than acknowledging what they'd done, rather than taking any responsibility for the situation they'd created, told me everything I needed to know. They still didn't get it. They might never get it. And that was okay. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need closure or apologies or acknowledgement. I didn't need anything from them at all. I texted back. I have no interest in a meeting. All financial support was voluntary and is now discontinued. If your client wishes to discuss this matter further, they can contact me directly. Though I should warn you, I have excellent legal representation of my own. This was technically true. Lumina had a team of corporate attorneys who would be more than happy to handle something like this, though I doubted it would come to that. I blocked the number and put my phone on silent. The night was quiet. The ocean was eternal. Emma was safe in her room, dreaming whatever 7-year-olds dream. We were okay. Better than okay. We were free. The next 3 days unfolded with the inevitability of dominoes falling. Each family member hit their crisis point at different times, in different ways, but all with the same fundamental realization. The life they'd been living wasn't sustainable without me. Victoria's came first, on Monday when her rent was due. I knew this only because she FaceTimed me, a video call, not just text, her face streaked with mascara, her designer apartment visible behind her. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "How could you do this to me?" she said instead of hello. "How could you just, Sarah, I'm getting evicted, do you understand what that means?" I did understand. I also understood that her rent was $4,200 a month for a 1-bedroom in a luxury building in downtown Seattle. That she'd chosen that apartment specifically for its Instagram-worthy aesthetic. That she made approximately $47,000 a year at her marketing job. A job she complained about constantly, but refused to leave because it was prestigious. "Victoria," I said calmly, "you're 29 years old. You have a job. You can afford a reasonable apartment on your salary if you make reasonable choices." "Reasonable? I can't afford this place on my salary. You know that." "I do know that. Which is why you chose an apartment you couldn't afford, knowing I would pay the difference." "That's not, you never said you'd stop." "I never said I'd continue forever, either. You just assumed." "Because you're my sister." Her voice cracked. "Sisters help each other." "Do they?" I asked. "When's the last time you helped me with anything?" Silence. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not fair. You never needed help. You were fine." "I was fine because I worked 90-hour weeks to build a company from nothing. I was fine because I made sacrifices and choices and didn't rely on anyone else to fund my life. I was fine because I had to be. So what am I supposed to do now? She asked. And there was genuine panic in her voice. Real fear. She'd been living beyond her means for so long that the ground beneath her had become invisible. And now she was falling. Find a cheaper apartment. Make a budget. Live within your means. Be an adult. You're punishing me for one dinner. I'm not punishing you. I'm just not funding your life anymore. There's a difference. This is so fucked up, she said, and hung up. I stared at my blank screen for a moment, waiting to feel something. Guilt, regret, satisfaction. I felt only a strange neutrality, as if I were watching someone else's life play out at a safe distance. Emma came into the room, ready for school in her uniform, backpack slung over her shoulders. Was that Aunt Victoria? She asked. Yes. She sounded upset. She is upset. She's learning that some choices have consequences. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to everything. Like how I had to clean my room when I made a mess? Exactly like that, I said, and kissed her forehead. Come on, let's get you to school. Marcus's crisis came Tuesday evening. He showed up at my house unannounced, which should have been impossible given the gate code and security system, but he'd apparently talked his way past the guard service by claiming it was an emergency. I heard the doorbell while making dinner. Grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, Emma's favorite. Through the security camera, I saw Marcus standing on my front porch, looking uncomfortable in designer jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I considered not answering, but Emma had already run to the door, excited by the novelty of a visitor. Is that Uncle Marcus? She asked. Yes, I murmured. Go wash your hands for dinner, okay? I'll handle this. She went, sensing the tension, and I opened the door. Marcus looked around with undisguised awe. He'd never been to my house. None of them had. I'd never invited them, and they'd never asked. Holy shit, he breathed. This is your place. Yes, this is, wow, okay. He ran a hand through his hair. Can I come in? I'd rather you didn't. What do you need, Marcus? What do I... Sarah, you cut me off completely. I have bills due. I have a payment for my studio space. I have a business that isn't making money. I finished. Yes, I know. I've been subsidizing it for 3 years. It's not subsidizing, it's investing. There's a difference. Not when there's no return on investment, there isn't. He flinched. That's harsh. It's factual. Marcus, you've started 5 businesses in 5 years. None of them have succeeded. None of them have even broken even. At some point, you have to acknowledge that maybe entrepreneurship isn't your path, or that you need to approach it differently, or that you need to actually learn business fundamentals instead of just buying expensive equipment and hoping for the best. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I built a company from nothing. I know what it takes. I know what it costs. I know the difference between someone who's serious about building something and someone who likes the idea of being an entrepreneur more than they like doing the actual work. His face reddened. You think you're better than me? I think I'm more successful than you, yes. Because I worked for it. Because I sacrificed. Because I didn't have anyone funding my dream. I funded it myself. Not everyone can do that. You're right, I said. Not everyone can. But you had every advantage I didn't. You had a family that supported you, encouraged you, believed in you. You had no child to care for, no one depending on you all the time and resources in the world to figure out what you wanted. And you still couldn't make it work. Not because you lack ability, but because you lack commitment. You want success without struggle. You want the lifestyle without the work. And I'm done enabling that. So that's it. You're just abandoning me. I'm not abandoning you. I'm letting you stand on your own feet. There's a difference. He stared at me, and I saw something shift in his face. A recognition, maybe, or the resentment. Hard to tell which. You know what? He said finally. Victoria was right. You've been rich this whole time and just, what? Playing poor? Watching us struggle? That's sick, Sarah. I wasn't playing anything. I just didn't advertise my success to people who would either dismiss it or resent it. And I was right not to, clearly. We're family. Family doesn't call each other a disgrace at Christmas dinner. Family doesn't kick their sister out of the house in a snowstorm with her daughter. Family doesn't spend years taking money while simultaneously criticizing the person giving it to them. That was Dad, not me. You sat there, I said quietly. You sat there and said nothing. You recorded it on your phone. You laughed. His face went pale. I wasn't. Goodbye, Marcus. I closed the door while he was still stammering, still trying to find a defense that didn't exist. Through the window, I watched him walk back to his car, a BMW M3 I'd helped him buy with an investment in his last failed venture. He sat in the driver's seat for a long time, head in his hands. I felt something then. Not guilt exactly, more like mourning. Mourning for the relationship we'd never had. Mourning for the brother who might have existed in a different family, in a different story. But I didn't unlock the door. My parents' reckoning came Wednesday morning, delivered not by phone or in person, but by mail. An official letter from their bank, forwarded to me by mistake because I was still listed as a contact on their account. Notice of foreclosure proceedings, I read it twice, then a third time, each word sinking in like stones. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage payments. Not because of me. I'd never paid their mortgage directly, only their property taxes and incidental expenses. But because they'd been using the money I'd given them for other things, the country club, dinners out, gifts, vacations. They'd been living as if the money would never stop coming, and when it did, they'd continued spending anyway, depleting their savings, maxing credit cards, missing payments, 3 months. This had been building for a while. They'd been in trouble even before I stopped helping. I sat in my office, the letter in my hands, and tried to feel something. Alarm? Guilt? Responsibility? All I felt was tired. They'd built a life they couldn't afford, sustained by money they'd never acknowledged. And now the structure was collapsing. Not because I'd pulled my support. That had been the final straw, maybe. But not the cause. The cause was decades of choices, of living beyond their means, of prioritizing image over reality. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. Sarah. She sounded exhausted, defeated. I got the foreclosure notice, I said. A long silence. Then, I didn't want you to know. Mom, I was listed on the account. The bank forwarded it automatically. Oh, another silence. I don't know what we're going to do. Your father won't talk about it. He just keeps saying it'll be fine, that the lawyer will fix everything. But Sarah, I don't think... Her voice broke. I don't think there's anything to fix. How long have you been behind on payments? Since September, we've been using the money you sent for other things. We thought we could catch up. We thought your father's pension check would be bigger this year, or Marcus would pay back some of what we'd loaned him, or something would come through. And we could fix it before I found out, she meant. Before they had to admit the truth. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, and I genuinely wanted to know. Why didn't you say you were in trouble? I would have helped if you'd been honest. Because your father is proud, she said simply. Because admitting we needed help meant admitting we'd failed. Because it was easier to just keep going, keep pretending everything was fine. And then you'd send the money every month. And it was so easy to just use it for other things, to pretend it was ours, that we'd earned it somehow. It became normal. We forgot it could stop. You called me a disgrace, I said quietly. You let Dad kick me out while you were living on my money. How could you do that? I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know, Sarah. I don't have an excuse. I was weak. I've always been weak. I let your father say things, horrible things, because it was easier than standing up to him. I let him treat you the way his father treated him, because I told myself it would make you stronger. I let him hurt you because I was a coward. This was the most honest she'd ever been with me. Maybe the most honest she'd ever been with herself. I'm not going to save you, I said. I'm not going to pay off the mortgage or fix this. You and Dad need to figure it out yourselves. I know. But I will help you with one thing. I'll pay for 3 months of financial counseling. A real counselor who can help you downsize budget and figure out how to live within your actual means, Susan. And I'll help you with moving costs if you need to sell the house and find something smaller. Your father will never agree. Then he can live in denial while the bank takes the house. But the offer stands for you, Mom. Just you. If you want to make different choices, I'll support that. But I won't support the life you've been living. That's over. She was crying now. Quiet sobs that made me sad in a distant, abstract way. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry for everything. You deserved better from us. You always deserved better. Yes, I said simply. I did. I hung up, feeling strangely empty. Not victorious, not vindicated, just tired. Tired of being the adult in relationships where I should have been allowed to be a child. Tired of carrying people who refuse to carry themselves. Tired of everything. Emma found me in my office an hour later. Mama, you okay? Yeah, baby. Just thinking. About Grandma and Grandpa. How did you know? She shrugged. So, your sad face. You get a specific face when you think about them. I pulled her into my lap. This small person who saw too much, who understood too much, who'd been forced to be wise beyond her years because the adults in her life couldn't manage to be wise themselves. I'm okay, I promised. I'm better than okay. We're okay. Are they okay? She asked. It was such a simple question, asked with genuine concern. Emma didn't hate my family. She barely knew them well enough to have strong feelings one way or another. She just knew they were people who were sad, and she had enough empathy to care about that, even though they'd never cared about her. No, I admitted, they're not okay, but they will be eventually. They're learning things they should have learned a long time ago. Can we help them? We already are, I said. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do for someone is let them figure things out on their own. She thought about this, then nodded. Like when I couldn't draw hands, and you didn't draw them for me, you just let me practice until I got it right. Exactly like that. She hugged me tight, and I held her, this perfect small human who'd somehow turned out kind and thoughtful and generous, despite, or maybe because of, everything we'd been through. I love you, Mama, she said. I love you more, I answered, and squeezed her hand 4 times. 2 weeks passed. The calls and texts gradually decreased from frantic to occasional to rested. The lawyer stopped contacting me after I had my corporate counsel send him a polite but firm letter explaining that voluntary financial support can be withdrawn at any time, and that any attempt to sue me would be immediately countered with a harassment claim. I watched from a distance as my family's life reorganized itself around the new reality. Victoria moved into a studio apartment in a less fashionable neighborhood. She posted about it on Instagram with a surprisingly honest caption. Downsizing and learning what I actually need versus what I thought I needed. Turns out I need less than I thought. Had growth, real talk. The comments were supportive. She was learning, maybe. Or at least performing learning, which was a start. Marcus got a job. An actual 9-to-5 job at a marketing firm, using the business degree he'd gotten 10 years ago, and then promptly ignored in favor of his entrepreneurial fantasies. He posted a photo of his first day with the caption, "New chapter, humble beginnings." It wasn't actually humble. The firm was prestigious and probably paid well. But for Marcus, having a boss and a schedule counted as humble, I suppose. My parents listed their house. A for sale sign appeared in the yard of the home I'd grown up in, the house where every Christmas of my life had been celebrated, where 32 years of memories lived in the walls. I felt something when I saw the listing. My mother had texted me the link, not asking for anything, just sharing. But I couldn't name what it was. Nostalgia? Relief? Grief? All of the above, maybe. Or none of them. Maybe some things don't fit into neat emotional categories. They were moving to a condo. A nice one, my mother assured me in her occasional texts. Texts that never asked for anything, never demanded anything, just kept a thin thread of connection open. 2 bedrooms, a small patio, close to a grocery store and a park. They could afford it on my father's pension. They'd have to downsize significantly, sell furniture and belongings accumulated over 4 decades. But they could do it. My father never called, never texted. His silence was its own communication. Pride, stubbornness, an inability to admit he'd been wrong. I didn't mind. His silence was easier than his words had ever been. I'd been prepared for more drama, more attempts to manipulate or guilt me into resuming support. But it didn't come. Maybe they were finally learning. Maybe they'd used up all their arguments. Maybe they were simply too exhausted to keep fighting. Or maybe, and this seemed most likely, They'd found other people to lean on. I heard through my mother that Aunt Linda had offered to help with moving costs, that some cousins I barely knew had organized a meal train, that their church community was rallying around them. They'd been wealthy, or appeared wealthy, and people had enjoyed their proximity to that wealth. Now they were struggling, publicly, and a different group of people was drawn to that. The martyrs, the helpers, the ones who find purpose in saving people. I wondered if they'd learn anything from this, if they'd recognize the pattern, if they'd understand that building a life on other people's generosity, whether mine or their churches or anyone's, wasn't sustainable. Probably not, but that wasn't my responsibility anymore. Emma and I fell into a new rhythm, without the looming obligation of family gatherings, without the tension of managing their expectations. Our life became remarkably peaceful. We had breakfast together every morning before school. Never rushed, always time for conversation. She told me about her classes, her friends, a boy named Lucas who'd pushed her on this playground and then apologized by giving her his chocolate milk at lunch. We talked about her artwork, about the stories she was writing, about her dreams. "I want to be an artist," she announced one morning. "A real one, with a gallery and everything." "Then you will be," I said. "How do you know?" "Because you're committed. Because you practice every day. Because you love it enough to work at it. That's all you need. Love and work and commitment. The rest is just time." She thought about this. "Is that how you made your company? Yes. Did it make you happy?" I paused, really considering the question. It made me proud. It made me feel capable. It gave us this life. But the thing that makes me happy is you. The company was just a tool that let me build the life I wanted for us. Oh. She stirred her cereal thoughtfully. "So if I become an artist, that's the tool. But the happy part is making the art." "Exactly." She smiled, satisfied with this logic, and went back to her breakfast. These conversations, these small perfect moments, this was what I'd been protecting when I walked away from my family. This peace, this joy, this uncomplicated love. 3 weeks after the Christmas dinner, I received an unexpected email. From Linda Morrison, subject: "I owe you an apology." I almost deleted it, but curiosity made me open it instead. "Sarah, I need to apologize. When your father called me that day and asked me to reach out to you, I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't think enough about what you might be experiencing or why you might have made the choice you did. I just assumed, because he's my brother, because I've known him my whole life, that his version of events was accurate. I've since learnt more about the situation. Not from your father, he won't talk about it, but from your mother, and from doing some research about you and your company. Sarah, I had no idea. I had no idea about your success, about your generosity, about what you'd been doing for them all these years. And I had no idea how they treated you. I remember you as a little girl. I remember you being bright and curious and kind. I remember thinking you were special. And then I let decades pass without really staying in touch, without really knowing you, without being present in your life. I fell into the same trap as everyone else. I let your father's narrative become the only narrative, and I never questioned it. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not asking you to forgive your father. or to resume supporting them, or to reconcile. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. I see what you built, what you accomplished, what you've been carrying. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. If you ever want to talk, or to rebuild some kind of connection, I'd welcome that. But I understand if you don't. I understand if you need to protect your peace. With respect and regret, Linda. I read the email 3 times. It was the first real apology I'd received from anyone in my family. Not a sorry but, or a sorry if, or a sorry you feel that way, just an actual, genuine acknowledgement of failure. I sat with it for a few days, thinking about what I wanted to do. In the end, I replied, Linda, thank you for your email. I appreciate your honesty and your apology. I'm not interested in rebuilding relationships with my immediate family right now. Maybe not ever. But I'm open to knowing you better if that's something you genuinely want. No obligations, no expectations. Just 2 people getting to know each other. Sarah. She replied within an hour. I'd like that very much. We started emailing. Casual conversations about life, work, books. She told me about her career as a high school English teacher, about her husband who died 2 years ago, about her own complicated relationship with my father growing up. I told her about Emma, about Lumina, about the life I'd built. We didn't talk about the Christmas dinner. We didn't talk about my parents' financial troubles or my siblings' struggles. We just talked, like 2 adults getting to know each other, unencumbered by history or obligation. It was nice. Surprisingly so. Maybe not all family relationships were irredeemable. Maybe some people were capable of growth, of seeing their mistakes, of choosing differently. Maybe. 4 weeks after the dinner, I received a letter, an actual physical letter, delivered by mail to my house. The return address was my parents' old house, now sold in escrow but still their legal residence for a few more days. The handwriting on the envelope was my father's. I almost threw it away without opening it. But Emma saw it and asked what it was, and I couldn't explain why I was throwing away mail without reading it. So I opened it. Inside was a single page, written in my father's precise handwriting. Sarah, I am not good at apologies. I never have been. My father taught me that apologizing was weakness, that real meds didn't admit mistakes, that authority once ceded is never reclaimed. He was wrong. About many things, but especially about that. I have spent the past month watching everything I built fall apart. Not the house, that's just a building, and we'll find another. But my relationships, my family, my sense of who I am. All of it has been crumbling, and I have had no choice but to examine why. I called you a disgrace. I kicked you out of my house on Christmas. I let you support us financially for years, while simultaneously criticizing every choice you made. I was cruel, dismissive, and arrogant. I was everything a father shouldn't be. I could offer explanations. My own father was worse. I was projecting my disappointments onto you. I was scared by your independence and success. But explanations aren't excuses. I hurt you, repeatedly, for your entire life. And you deserved better. You built something remarkable. You raised your daughter beautifully. You succeeded in ways I never did, and instead of being proud of you, I resented you for it. That says everything about me and nothing about you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to resume a relationship with me. I don't expect anything except that you'll read this and know that I finally see you. I finally understand what you accomplished, what you sacrificed, what you've been carrying. And I'm sorry. I'm deeply, profoundly sorry. You were right to walk away. You were right to protect yourself and your daughter. You were right about everything. I hope you find peace, Sarah. I hope you find happiness. I hope your daughter grows up knowing she has a mother who loved her enough to choose her over everyone else. I'm proud of you. I should have said that 32 years ago. I should have said it every day since. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you. Dad, I read the letter once, then again, then a third time, sitting in my office while the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I cried, not from sadness exactly, not from joy either, from something more complicated, a release maybe, a letting go of all the years I'd spent trying to earn words like these, only to discover that when they finally came, they didn't change anything fundamental. I was still choosing distance. I was still protecting my peace. But I could acknowledge that he'd finally seen me, finally understood, finally grown enough to admit his failures. It was something. It wasn't enough to rebuild a relationship, but it was something. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer in my desk. Maybe someday I'd show it to Emma, when she was old enough to understand complex family dynamics, when she could appreciate the significance of someone admitting they were wrong, even when it was decades too late. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe some things were just for me. That evening, Emma and I walked on the beach. The sun was setting, turning the ocean into liquid gold. She collected shells, examined them carefully, kept only the most perfect ones for her collection. "Mama," she said, holding up a particularly beautiful shell, cream-colored with pink spirals. "This one's my favorite." "It's perfect," I agreed. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you sad about your family?" I thought about how to answer this. Emma was 8 now. Her birthday had passed quietly 2 weeks ago. Just the two of us and a few of her friends from school. She was old enough for truth, young enough that truth still needed to be gentle. "Sometimes," I said, "I'm sad about what could have been and about the family I wish I'd had. But I'm not sad about the choice I made. Does that make sense?" She nodded seriously. "Like how I'm sad I can't have a puppy because you're allergic, but I'm not sad we got fish instead. The fish are good even if they're not what I wanted first." I laughed. "Yes, exactly like that. You're very wise, you know that." "I know," she said matter-of-factly, and skipped ahead. Her shells clutched in her small fist, her hair flying behind her in the wind. I watched her go, this perfect small human I'd made, this person who would grow up knowing that love didn't mean accepting harm, that family wasn't always blood, that peace was worth protecting even when it cost you everything else. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in impossible colors. Emma squealed as a wave surprised her, jumping back and laughing. The sound carried on the wind, pure and joyful, untainted by the weight of complicated histories or unmet expectations. This was what I'd chosen. This life, this peace, this small perfect human who knew she was loved unconditionally, who would never have to earn her place in my heart, who would grow up believing she was enough exactly as she was. I'd chosen correctly. Summer came to Malibu the way it always did. Gradually, then all at once. The marine layer burned off earlier each morning until we had full days of sunshine, the beach crowded with families and surfers and dogs chasing balls into the waves. Emma finished second grade. Her teacher called me in for a conference, not because there were problems, but because Emma had created something the teacher thought I should see. A series of paintings depicting emotional landscapes. Abstract representations of feelings rendered in color and shape and movement. They were sophisticated beyond her years, startling in their emotional honesty. She has real talent, the teacher said. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've never seen a child this age with this kind of emotional intelligence in their art. Have you considered specialized programs? There are summer intensives for gifted young artists. I had. I'd been researching them, finding the balance between nurturing Emma's gifts and letting her be a child. We'd settled on a 2-week program in San Francisco. Nothing too intense, just a chance to learn from working artists and meet other kids who saw the world the way she did. She was excited, nervous, but excited. It's going to be amazing, I told her as we packed. You're going to learn so much. What if the other kids are better than me? Then you'll learn from them. That's the point. You don't grow by being the best in the room. You grow by being challenged. She thought about this, then nodded. Like how you built your company? Exactly like that. We flew to San Francisco together. I'd rearranged my schedule. The benefit of being the CEO was that I could make these choices. Could decide that being present for Emma's experiences mattered more than any meeting or deadline. On her last day, they had an exhibition. Parents were invited to see what the students had created over the 2 weeks. Emma's piece was extraordinary, a large canvas covered in layers of colour, abstract but somehow clearly representational of something essential. Joy and sadness existing simultaneously, light and shadow, complexity rendered beautiful. What do you call it? I asked her. Home. She said, simply. I looked at the painting again with new eyes. The swirls of blue, ocean, the golden streaks, sunlight, the darker patches, not sadness but depth, complexity, the full range of human experience. And at the center, barely visible unless you looked closely, 2 figures, a woman and a child holding hands. It's perfect, I said, my voice thick. I know, she said, grinning, and ran off to show her friends. I stood in front of the painting for a long time, surrounded by other parents and their children. Everyone chatting and laughing and celebrating. No one knew my story. No one knew about the Christmas dinner, or the family I'd walked away from, or the empire I'd built in silence. I was just another mother, proud of her daughter, present and engaged and loving. It was enough. It was everything. Later that week, I received an unexpected visitor at Lumina's office. My assistant buzzed me. Sarah, there's a Victoria Morrison here to see you. She says she's your sister. I paused, my fingers frozen over my keyboard. Victoria, here, in my office. Give me 5 minutes, then send her in, I said. I used those 5 minutes to breathe, to center myself, to decide how I wanted to handle this. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I was just curious. When Victoria walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was different, longer, less styled, more natural. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, no designer labels visible. She looked older somehow, more real. "Hi," she said, hovering by the door. "Thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "Sit down." She sat, looking around my office, and the windows overlooking the bay, the sleek furniture, the awards on the wall, the company logo etched in glass. Taking it all in, maybe finally understanding what I'd built. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said quickly. "I just wanted to... I needed to tell you something. In person." "Okay." She took a breath. "I've been going to therapy since March. At first, it was because I was so angry at you, and I thought the therapist would validate that, would tell me I was right to feel betrayed. But instead, she helped me see a lot of things about myself, about our family, about you." I waited. Let her continue at her own pace. "I was jealous of you," she said, "my whole life. You were smart and talented and independent, and I was none of those things. Or I was, maybe, but I never developed them because it was easier to just be pretty, to just rely on charm, to just let other people, let you, take care of things. And I resented you for being better at life than I was, even while I was depending on you." "Victoria, let me finish, please." She wiped at her eyes. "What we did at Christmas was unforgivable. What Dad said was unforgivable. And I sat there and said nothing. Worse than nothing. I participated. Because it felt good in the moment to tear you down. To make you small so I could feel bigger. I'm so ashamed of that. I'm so ashamed of all of it." "Okay," I said gently. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking to be in your life. I just needed you to know that I see you now. I see what you did for us, what you sacrificed, what you built. And I see how we treated you. The therapy is helping. And I'm trying to be different, to be better. I got a promotion at work. I'm managing my own money now. Actually managing it, with a budget and everything. I'm learning to stand on my own feet." "I'm glad," he said. And I meant it. "I have one question," she said. "And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But why did you help us for so long? Why did you keep giving when we gave you nothing back?" I thought about this, really thought about it, "Because I loved you," I said finally. "Because you're my sister. Because I hoped that if I was generous enough, kind enough, successful enough, you'd finally see me as someone valuable. Someone worth loving back. It took me 32 years to realize that I can't make people see me if they choose not to. That love isn't transactional. That giving and giving and giving doesn't change people who don't want to change." She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know. Can I ask about Emma? How is she?" I smiled. The first genuine smile of this conversation. "She's incredible. She's talented and kind and happy. She's everything. I'd like to meet her. The real her, not the kid I ignored at family dinners. But I understand if that's not something you're open to." I considered this. Emma barely remembered Victoria. Starting fresh might actually be easier than trying to repair something that had never really existed. Maybe, I read, someday. But it would be on my terms, in my time, with boundaries we'd established clearly beforehand. And if you hurt her, if you're anything less than kind to her, we're done, permanently. I understand, and I wouldn't expect anything else. We sat in silence for a moment. Two sisters who'd spent most of their lives not really knowing each other, finally seeing each other clearly. I should go, Victoria said, standing. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting me say this. Victoria, I said, as she reached the door. Good luck. I mean that. I hope you figure things out. She smiled, a sad, genuine smile. Thanks. I hope you're happy, Sarah. You deserve to be happy. I am, I said. I really am. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time processing. I didn't know if Victoria would actually change, if therapy would stick, if this was genuine growth or just another performance. But it didn't matter. My peace didn't depend on her transformation. My life didn't require her participation. If she changed, truly changed, maybe someday there could be a relationship. A new one, built on honesty and boundaries and mutual respect. Or maybe there wouldn't be, and that was okay too. I'd learned that you could love people from a distance. You could hope for their growth without being responsible for it. You could acknowledge their apologies without resuming relationships. You could choose yourself without being selfish. That night, Emma and I had dinner on the deck. She chatted about her art program, about the friends she'd made, about techniques she'd learned. I listened, asked questions, marveled at her passion. Mama, she said as the sun set, are you happy? Yes, I said without hesitation. I'm very happy. Me too, she said. Then, I'm glad it's just us. Just us? I mean, I know other kids have big families, grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff, and sometimes I wonder what that's like. But then I think about how much love we have, just the two of us, and it feels like enough, like more than enough, like we have more love than some people with huge families. She was right. We did. I'm glad it's us too, I said, and squeezed her hand 4 times. She squeezed back 3 times, grinning. The ocean stretched out before us, infinite and eternal. The sun painted the sky in impossible colors. Somewhere in the world, my family was learning to live without me, discovering their own strength, or failing to, growing or stagnating, changing or staying the same. It wasn't my responsibility to know which. It wasn't my responsibility to care. My responsibility was here, in this moment, with this child, in this life we'd built together. And it was beautiful. So much more beautiful than anything I'd left behind. A year after the Christmas dinner, I received one final letter. This one from my mother, postmarked from their new condo. Dear Sarah, I'm writing to tell you that your father and I are doing okay. We're in the new place now and it's nice. Smaller, but nicer in some ways. We have everything we need, and we're learning to live within our means. It's been humbling, but maybe we needed humble. Your father reads your articles when they appear in magazines or online. He won't admit it, but I see the browser history. He's proud of you. even if he still can't say it to your face. I'm proud of you too. I know I failed you in almost every way a mother can fail a daughter. I let you be hurt when I should have protected you. I was complicit in your dismissal. I chose comfort over courage. Again and again and again. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I see my failures clearly now. And I'm trying, in my small ways, to be different. I volunteer at a women's shelter 3 times a week. I work with mothers who are struggling, who are alone, who need support. I can't fix what I failed to give you, but maybe I can give it to someone else. Maybe that counts for something. I hope Emma is well. I hope she's happy. I hope she grows up knowing she has a mother who chose her over everything else, who protected her, who loved her enough to walk away from people who would have hurt her. I hope you found peace, Sarah. You deserve it. You always did. With love and regret, Mum. I read the letter on my deck, watching Emma paint a new sunset, her easel set up in the perfect light, her face serious with concentration. I didn't reply to my mother's letter. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday we'd rebuild some small connection, some thread of understanding. Or maybe we wouldn't. And this letter would stand as the final word in a complicated story. An acknowledgement that came too late to change anything, but was still, somehow, meaningful. I folded the letter and put it away. Not thrown out, not destroyed, just set aside. A piece of history, a marker of how far I'd traveled, a reminder of what I'd left behind and why. Emma looked up from her painting. "Mama, come see." I went. I stood behind her and looked at her canvas. Another emotional landscape. This one brighter than the others. Full of gold and orange and red. Movement and joy rendered in color. "What's this one called?" I asked. "Choosing," she said. "Because you chose me. And choosing is powerful." "It is," I agreed, wrapping my arms around her shoulders. "It's the most powerful thing there is." We stood there together, watching the real sunset compete with her painted one. Both beautiful in different ways, both temporary and eternal simultaneously. I'd chosen correctly, every single day. In 1,000 small ways, and a few big ones, I'd chosen correctly. And I'd keep choosing, keep protecting, keep building this life, this peace, this small, perfect world where my daughter knew she was enough, where she knew she was chosen, where she'd grow up understanding that love doesn't hurt, that family should lift you up, that peace is worth protecting even when it costs you everything else. This was enough. This was everything. This was home. The sun sank lower, painting everything gold. Emma went back to her painting. I stood beside her, watching her create, watching her choose her colors and make her marks, watching her build something beautiful from nothing. Just like I had. Just like she would continue to do for the rest of her life. And somewhere, in a smaller house in a different city, my family was learning the same lesson I'd learned years ago. That you can't build a life on someone else's foundation. That you have to stand on your own feet. That the only person responsible for your success or failure is you. They'd figure it out or they wouldn't. They'd grow can or they wouldn't. They'd eventually understand what they'd lost or they'd continue in denial. It didn't matter. Not anymore. What mattered was here now, this moment, this child, this life. What mattered was choosing. Every day, choosing peace. Choosing love. choosing ourselves. I'd made my choice, and I'd never been freer.